and welcome to An Outside View. I'm Ann Ragasta, and I'm your host for today for what I hope is a very informative interview of Heather Hamilton, candidate for Norfolk County Commissioner. Welcome, Heather, and thank you for appearing on the show.
Oh, thank you, Ann, for having me.
So, can you start by telling the viewers a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I'm originally from Portland, Maine, and I bounced around over the years, landed in Brookline, Massachusetts about 10 years ago. It was supposed to be a pit stop for me. I got the job of my dreams working at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, and I worked there for about 7 years. Went to grad school across the river at Harvard, and then as I was graduating, I was starting to think about, okay, what do I do with this new master's education? And somebody said, you know, you should think about running for select board for our town. And so I did, and I've served on the Brookline Select Board for 3 years. I was actually just reelected to my second term this spring.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been just an unbelievable experience, learning how things work, helping your community, and a very humbling experience, learning just how much you don't know about anything from very localized issues, like Brookline has an elected town clerk, and so COVID and a number of issues have impacted that office, to resolutions that impact the entire country. People bring those before town meeting as resolutions, warrant articles. So it's just been a really interesting experience. And last year I was talking to someone and they said, do you know that we still have county commissioners in Norfolk County? And I said, gee, no, I didn't. So I started to research the position. What got my attention was finding out that somebody claimed that there had never been a woman elected. I found out through fact checking that there had been one woman elected over 30 years ago. But that's what got my interest at first, the lack of female representation. But what continued and ignited my commitment to actually running was just finding out that I'm not entirely sure why we still have this layer of government, what it does, and whether it's truly serving a function that we all can agree is the way we want our tax dollars spent.
Great, thank you. And it's funny about being a select woman, it definitely gives you good executive experience.
Yes, you go through a budget process, you learn exactly how to prioritize competing interests. The schools, we have to give public education to anyone who resides within the town, whether they're a citizen or not.
Right.
And so that, coupled with Prop 2.5, which limits your ability to raise revenues per year without new growth, it really is the art of balancing your checkbook. It's just one heck of a big checkbook.
Right. Great. So I know you're running as an independent, and I understand that you were a Democrat prior to this election. Did you change party affiliations because of this election? And if so, why?
I actually have never been a registered Democrat.
Okay.
I've always been unenrolled. I have Democratic leanings. I think a lot of people in Massachusetts do. I just don't identify with the party structure. And there are a number of reasons. One, I think it harkens back to my Maine roots. There tends to be a little bit more embracing of that independent. We don't call it unenrolled in Maine. It's just referred to as independent. And 40% of registered voters in Massachusetts are unenrolled. I actually think that it is an identity, but people are not used to thinking of it as an identity. The other thing that has turned me off is, one of my biggest pet peeves is internal inconsistency. So what I think of when I think of conservative theory, I think of limited government, individual responsibility, choice, these types of concepts. When I think of democratic principles, I think of wanting to provide social services for people who need them, and embracing everyone, and really trying to build the kind of society that we want, and to be as inclusive as possible. The way we get there, I think, is where a lot of people disagree. So by being an independent, I kind of get the best of both worlds. I don't fall snugly in the conservative theory, and I don't fall snugly in the Democratic theory. And then the other thing that has turned me off is, I mean, the national politics, but also the way we've done primaries. And I think it has really skewed us to having this this false choice. You know, you have a very small subset of voters voting for people who then advance on, and I think most of us fall somewhere in the middle. And the people who are advanced through the primary system are not reflective of that.
So it sounds to me as if you are not an independent in name only. You are truly independent in your thoughts, and you've attempted to take the best of both parties, if you even believe in a two-party system, the best of their ideologies and trying to frame it into your own independent thinking. And that's very
hope so.
refreshing. That sounds like the very definition of an independent thinker. Can you tell the viewers what is the role and function of the Norfolk County Board of Commissioners, and how does their role impact Walpole? I know you had touched briefly upon, it seems like an extra layer of government that maybe its time has passed, but clearly you're running for a position in it, so it is relevant to some extent, and I guess it's your job, if you're elected, to determine how it remains relevant or if you think it should not. But tell us, what does Norfolk County Commissioners do?
Sure. I leave room for the possibility that I don't have all the information and that I could be wrong, that you know, it is serving a function, and I will be delighted if I am corrected. The primary functions that this office, because there are a number of independently elected offices in the county structure, which I didn't really appreciate until I, you know, decided to run for this. County
Register
treasurer, probate,
yep, you're right.
Deeds, sheriff. So the county commissioners, from what I gather, really serve three primary functions. One, they oversee the golf course in Quincy, sometimes referred to as President's Golf Course or sometimes referred to as Wollaston Recreational Facility. That's in Quincy.
Okay.
Then one of the other primary responsibilities, they serve as 3 out of the 7 school board members for the Walpole Agricultural High School.
Okay.
They also oversee part of the budget, but because they have tuition, they are fairly sustainable. I think the commissioner's office subsidizes that by about $4 million out of $14 million. And then the other thing that their primary function is they are, in essence, the landlord to all county-owned buildings, and that impacts Registry of Deeds and Treasurer's Office and whatnot.
Okay. So you said something that I hadn't even thought about with the Norfolk Aggie, that commissioners 3 of them are on the board of the school.
Yes.
If you were elected, would you have an opportunity to vie for one of those positions on the school board?
I would serve. The 3 commissioners serve as...
Oh, they do? Okay, the 3 automatically do
automatically.
that.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sure you've thought about the Norfolk Aggie and its funding and its acceptance, how, you know, the methodology of student acceptance. Have you thought about that? And have you given any consideration to changing that methodology, or have you not really?
Well, one of my first things that I plan to do if I get elected is to meet in person with Dr. Tammy Quinn, who I understand is the superintendent, and really hear from her about her experience and what works well and what doesn't work well. full disclosure, I own a very naughty 23-year-old pony that I met a couple years ago as a lesson horse, and then they were going to get rid of him. And at 23, not a lot of options
No kidding.
for a washed up,
It's true.
very naughty
Right.
lesson horse. So I bought Raisin, and I keep him in a facility at Bridgewater. And a lot of the girls who work at that facility actually attend Norfolk Agricultural High School.
That's
And so I've met a
fabulous.
lot of these girls and heard directly from them what it's like to be a student at this agricultural high school. And I really enjoy hearing from them, what kinds of classes that they're taking, what they hope to become through attending this school and not their high school that is more local to them. So I definitely want to have more of those conversations. The other thing that I'm really looking forward to, I think we need ambassadors for vocational and technical high schools. And I am really looking forward to going into traditional style high schools and even middle schools throughout the county and trying to get people to understand what Norfolk Agricultural High School is like and get people to ask, would this actually be an environment where I might thrive? And get them to really think about pursuing that as opposed to a 4-year degree after high school that they pay a whole bunch of money for, and then they're always financially behind because they never can quite pay down those student loans.
Yeah, and it's, when I listen to you, I hear, because I do know a lot of Walpole residents feel the same way. They love the idea of technical schools. They love the idea that we have one in our town, although we don't necessarily, our students don't automatically go there. But really the value of a tech school. So
Yes.
I think that's, I think that really separates you from the pack, actually, in terms of, because it sounds like you have, like I said, owning the horse, put you in sort of an agricultural slant, or at least some exposure.
Yeah,
that.
being around agricultural animals is really my zen. They're just so centered, and I tend to get into these environments where I'm really taxed because I'm looking at very complex problems, and I love it. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But you also need some time where you're just fully in the moment.
Mm-hmm. So I do think that is, the Norfolk County Agricultural School is definitely something that directly impacts Walpole. So
Yes.
I'm happy that you've really taken some interest in that, and I think the voters of Walpole will be too. Let's talk about how much of Walpole's money, I know every town within Norfolk County contributes to the Norfolk County Commissioner's budget.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a sense of what the total budget is? What's Walpole's share of it each year, if you know what it's based on? And what are they called shared services, or what is done with the money?
Sure. So the commissioner's office, the budget of the county commissioner's office, the primary source of funding is through deeds, excise tax. So that we all kind of pay into. The other significant revenue source are the county assessments.
Okay.
And all 28 communities in Norfolk County is assessed based on property value. And Brookline's is $1.2 million each year. I believe Walpole's is around $200,000 per year. The average is about $230,000 per community per year. I bring that up because this budget season was the worst budget season I have ever seen. And I've only really been involved in town governance for like 3 years. Other people have served much, much longer. Nobody really recalls a fiscal year that was this tumultuous. I mean, the pandemic has just had such an impact on local receipts and state aid. And we're fearful that this is going to continue into fiscal year 21 and 22, and maybe even 23. So $200,000 is a lot of money when you're faced with steep deficits. So when I find out that we're all being assessed to pay for a golf course that is at one end of the county, I would love to see who's using that golf course. Which communities do they come from, and do those communities have their own municipal golf course? I'm not against municipal-run golf courses. If Brookline has a municipal-run golf course, and it's very well utilized, and for a long time it was not revenue neutral, it was a money pit. But then we made certain investments to make sure that it was not a money pit and that it is in the black every year. And government needs to make sure that, especially recreational facilities, anything that is drawing on a lot of resources, has a way to try to minimize the impact. And I'm just concerned that you have this one of three primary responsibilities is on one end of the county, and I don't see the rest of the county utilizing this asset. Does that still make sense in today's world? Can we do something else with that property? Can we come up with a public-private partnership that would turn that into some sort of money generator? These are the types of questions that I just want to ask. I want to ask. I don't have an agenda. I just want to know. Have people started to ask these questions? Do we have answers for these questions? And what are they?
So it sounds, if you're elected, you'll have a seat at the table so that you can ask these probing questions and bring your ideas to the commission and see what can be done.
Yes.
Okay. I know that many of our viewers are eager to hear your views on the proposed solar farm on North Street in North Walpole. What is the county doing up there with respect to the solar farm? What are your views on the project? And how would you deal with the concerns of the residents who live close to the project? And not just listen to their concerns, but how would you meaningfully address their concerns? With the look of it, the environmental impact, that they might be cutting down huge swaths of forest, cutting off greenery, things like that. So I'm sure it's something that you've heard from some of the residents in North Walpole, so it would be great if you could address that.
Sure. A number of weeks ago, I was contacted by the Walpole Preservation Alliance and invited to go walk the property, which I did, and it is beautiful. And I've called into a lot of the county commissioner meetings that have started to talk about the project. Now, my understanding is there are a couple of phases to the project, and everybody is on board with the first phase, which is to put solar on buildings and to create, I think, almost like a garage over the parking lot. Those things totally make sense, and I understand this is a way to try to generate money, revenue, which is great, that it will provide an opportunity for the Norfolk Agricultural High School to train some of the kids in this technology and provide a career path for them. Also, great, love that. Where we start to diverge is when you start to talk about cutting down trees on one side of the Norfolk Agricultural High School's property, which is this beautiful wooded area. There are about 11 acres, and 7 out of the 11 acres would be completely clear cut, and solar panels would be installed. You can't really see them from what I'm being told. You would kind of see some missing, tree lines, but it's almost not about that. It's about the fact that a lot of the abutters, especially now with COVID and people walking or working from home and getting out in their local community, a lot more people are accessing the trails that are in the back of their houses that happen to be on this property. And there was also a lack of community engagement. So from what I understand, the commissioners and the entity, the solar entity, had a community meeting 3 years ago, and they're having a public hearing next month in November. But when I've asked people, what kind of community engagement did you do? Oh, well, we contacted the town. Okay, what does that mean? Well, we reached out to the town administrator and the select board, and they didn't really want to meet with us, which I've been told is not true. I don't know. I'm sure both parties feel like, the other one didn't really want to meet with them. But I asked a question which is the question in Brookline. Well, did you call the town meeting members? Walpole has elected town meeting like Brookline does. And that's what you do. When you have a controversial project that's going to affect that many people, you call the list. And the list is town meeting. And you set up as many public hearings, and you try to make all of these plans, the contract, how much money is being generated, publicly available. Try to find any information on the county commissioner's website. I found a one-page document that doesn't really say all that much. I can't even find the date for the public hearing on their website.
It sounds like a huge lack of transparency. And I remember back when this first started, I was a resident of Walpole, and the residents writ large, not just in North Walpole, but the administration felt that there was not the outreach that they said there was going to be, or again, it was lip service and not really to, like you say, discuss any common ground or negotiation or anything. But it sounds like if you're elected to this board, that's something that really goes to your heart in terms of you would be representing all of the community, and you really want to hear what they have to say. And you may not agree,
yeah,
but you want to hear because we all don't know everything, but to hear different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. And losing that kind of green space, I can understand losing it for a project where it is going to benefit so many people, but you need to respect the abutters enough to try to talk to them and try to at least get them to understand what is the end goal. What will this produce that can't be done anywhere else? And until I see, a project or assessment why they didn't go to the golf course and propose solar there.
It's actually a very good counterpoint. In the electricity that's generated, if the solar farm comes into being, and it's actually kind of two things. I thought Massachusetts law really required solar panels. The first place to be looked at would be on top of buildings or parking lots, not taking away green space. So I guess you're on firm ground there. But the amount of electricity that's going to be generated, who does it benefit? Is there a financial? What happens with is it financial? Is it just electricity wattage? And who gets that?
So 3 things. Your distinction on state law, I think, really primarily is about private land.
Okay.
So there are lots of local ordinances that prohibit solar panels on private property, and since the county government is a state or a government entity, they can bypass some of those ordinances.
Understood. But the
Yeah.
spirit,
Oh,
the
yes.
spirit
Yeah.
of the law
Yeah,
would
I
remain
think
would remain the
Yeah,
same.
a lot of people have qualms over taking down trees to put up solar panels. I think it's pitting one environmentalist against a different
Right.
type of
Right.
environmentalist.
When both share concerns about the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So your second point about who gets the money and the energy associated with the solar panels. So the energy that's generated goes into the grid, and the county would be paid for generating that energy. So it doesn't necessarily power the buildings at the agricultural high school, even though there's a proximity there. It goes into the grid, they're paid for that generation. So they are a generator of revenue. And it is a green source of energy.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to go on a totally different topic.
Okay.
Back in March and April of this year, Norfolk County received, I believe, $90 million from the federal government's $150 billion coronavirus relief fund by the CARES Act. The fund was established, as you know, to help cities and towns cover unbudgeted expenses caused by the coronavirus crisis. The Norfolk County Board of Commissioners opted to turn those funds over to the state and give the governor's office the power to determine how that money was to be spent. In contrast, Plymouth County voted against giving the funds to the state, which they stated because they felt they knew best which cities and towns in their county needed the funds and how it would be best be spent for their communities. Would you have voted to relinquish control of that $90 million that was specifically granted to Norfolk County? And if another grant is given to the county, how would you do that if the state, how would you respond if the state asked to take control of those funds and disperse it?
That is a really interesting quandary. I'm not sure how I would vote or how I would have voted. I can tell you there are a number of things that I would want to know that would factor into how I would then reach a decision. One is, how many communities are in Plymouth County versus Norfolk County? So trying to figure out if they're apples to apples. Then the other thing is, I assume, and I don't know this for sure, but I assume that one of the limiting factors for why Norfolk County would not be the administrator for that amount of money, because that's a lot of money to administer. And I do have a background in grant funding, so I understand all of the administrative things that go into that. You need to have somebody that first advertises that this money is available. Then you have to come up with qualifications for these projects. You have to work with communities and provide technical assistance so that they apply. You have to know about the projects. You have to then create a selection committee to, to choose these projects and award. And then there's all kinds of follow-up because this is taxpayer dollars. So you want to make sure that it's not being funneled into things that are not legal. Mm-hmm. And $90 million is a lot to keep track of. And I assume that one of the limiting factors, if not the limiting factor, is staff. So if you don't have enough staff to be able to really administer $90 million, then I could see myself voting it down. But that gets to another issue, which is if you don't have the resources to provide that kind of intermediate level of government, then why does this layer of government exist? And why don't we just do that, meaning dissolve, like Middlesex and Essex and a bunch more other county commissioners have done, and so the state then steps in. So I think it gets at a couple of different issues, which is why I'm running to find out. And I can't wait to find out.
I wish I was in your county because I couldn't wait to see what you find out too. And I think the voters are really going to be chomping at the bit to find out as well, to have a candidate that really just wants to get in there and deconstruct what is murky and opaque to people when, again, it's not just their municipal tax dollars that are going to the county, but when you, like you said, when you sell a house, or you go to the Registry of Deeds, all those fees, that's coming out of people's pocketbooks. And I don't think there's any animus towards county government. I think people probably feel some comfort in it because it's been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. But like you say, just to remove that veil of opaqueness is really refreshing. One last topic before we go talk about why voters should vote for you. Josephine Shea, your opponent's wife, is on the Norfolk County Retirement Board. Do you think there would be a conflict of interest if your opponent, one of your opponents, Mr. Shea, was elected to the Norfolk County Commission in light of the fact that Norfolk County Commission votes on matters pertaining to the Retirement Board? And this isn't about individual people, it's really about family members being on sort of connected commissions.
I would be interested to hear what I guess the Ethics Commission would have to say. I am not a lawyer, and Massachusetts conflict of interest law is really something that is, I think, fairly unique. I've lived in a number of other states and I've never encountered the types of conflict of interest guidance and situations that are really outlined as they are in Massachusetts. So I would love to hear what they would have to say. I could see them going either way. I worked at MassDOT for a number of years, and especially serving on an elected board in my town, conflict of interest came up. And I think as long as you disclose the conflict, and that basically means that you sign a paper advising the board that you have this relationship, that can sometimes suffice.
But just as a regular taxpayer, citizen in Norfolk County, would you prefer that your board members do not have conflicts of interest, disclosed or not? In terms of making decisions about municipal pensions, really.
I think we all, expect our electeds to not have a horse in the race.
Yep.
So I would have to, get elected and really understand the relationship between the retirement board and the county commissioner's office to be vocal about my opinion.
Fair enough. Very fair. Would you please tell the viewers why? I mean, it sounds to me like you've really given them a ton of information about yourself. But in a nutshell, why should they vote for you and not your opponents?
Sure. I think, one of my values is seeing more women in leadership positions. I think that not all women, but a lot of women work very collaboratively, and I think I possess this where I don't assume that I'm right all the time. And it's people who leave the door open to be wrong, where you can make the most headway with. Because if you're challenged or if you end up being wrong, you're like, oh, okay, and move on. I don't see that attribute in a lot of people, and I think it ends up doing more harm than good, because it becomes about the person's ego than it is about finding common ground and getting as many people served with the limited resources and time that we all have as possible. I also think that sometimes I forget that I am qualified, because I've always been me, and I remember when I hadn't finished college and hadn't gone through grad school and didn't serve on the select board for the largest town in Massachusetts. So I sometimes diminish my own accomplishments, and I've really seen a lot of things in the 3 very short years in Brookline, and I have learned so much. And I do think that will help prepare me for this next challenge, because county government is going to be a real challenge, especially when COVID devastates our local budgets. And having that select board experience, I think that's where a lot of people they know local and they know national. They don't really know the in-between.
Right.
And local is where you have the best community engagement. And I think that that's a lens that I certainly bring.
Sounds like you absolutely will bring that to the table. Tell the viewers how they can help your campaign between now and Election Day and on Election Day.
Well, you can visit my website, heatherhamilton.org. And if you want to donate, I mean, donations, especially in times of COVID where you can't have organic conversations and meet people at events. So we've had to switch pretty much online, like calling, texting, social media, and all of these things cost. So donations are greatly appreciated. If you want to hold a sign for me on Election Day, we can put you to work. I have plenty of signs. And if you want to just tell your friends and neighbors, just email, hey, I heard about this woman who really wants to be our next Norfolk County Commissioner. Whatever you want to do to help me, I would really, really appreciate it, including your vote. One of your 2 votes on the ballot November 3rd.
I think absolutely the vote is the most important. I know that sign standouts, not just sign standouts at the polling locations during early voting and on Election Day at the precinct locations really helps people make a decision. So if the viewers go on your webpage, there's a volunteer, they can click on something. So easy peasy, they can figure out how to contact you.
Yes, there was a tab with instructions on early voting, and there's a tab with a volunteer sign up that you can go to, and we could use it.
I urge all the viewers to absolutely go to your webpage and volunteer. I think it's just a wonderful opportunity for Walpole voters.
Thank you.
So in closing, I would like to thank you for coming on the show. It's been informative, it's been delightful, it's been such a pleasure talking with you and learning about you. I only wish that I still lived in Norfolk County so that I could vote for you, but unfortunately I don't, but I will absolutely make sure that the word gets out, because I think an informed voter is the best voter. And they can listen to what you've said, they can make their own decisions, they can compare you against your opponents, and they can decide, and I think they'll do it on Election Day. So thank you very much. And thank you for watching another exciting episode of An Outside View.